welcome back. If this is the first time that you're seeing me, my name is Owens and I had COVID March 2020 and this is my long haul experience. So I recently posted a video that I'll put up in the cards about my initial experience with COVID, so you might want to check that one out first before you watch this video. I went more in depth with these disclaimers in that video, so if you want to know more about my thoughts on them, you should go watch that, but I will give them again here just in case. Number one, I am not a medical professional. This is not medical advice. If you feel like you have symptoms, you are concerned, you have any questions about COVID-19 or anything else, please seek medical help from a professional, not from a girl on the internet. Number two, at any point in this story, I am following any and all guidelines from my state and from the government, the CDC, about what to do to protect yourself from COVID, including washing my hands, wearing a mask, socially distancing, staying home, anything else. Please follow all guidelines from the CDC and your local government. I caught COVID before I had the chance to avoid catching COVID, so don't put yourself in a position where you can get it, because it really sucks, and I didn't get the chance to avoid it. You have that chance. Take advantage of that chance. Number three, I experienced COVID with a fair amount of privilege, including white privilege, which meant that my healthcare was not impacted by the color of my skin, which not everybody can say, and also financial privilege of being able to seek medical attention without fear of how I might pay for it. And both of these things meant that I was very fortunate in how I got my care. There's more information about race and coronavirus and medical treatment in links down below. Number four, I do have multiple chronic illnesses, so my story is colored by that. And number five, if I sound hoarse or low energy or anything in this video, it's because I am a long hauler and I'm not feeling well at any point in time. So that's why. Okay. Let's get into the story. So I left off in the last video with me coming home from Boston to Chicago because I was so unwell. My parents decided I had to come home and live with them, which was the best decision. I was managing pretty well when I first got home. My symptoms were pretty much under control. I did feel very fatigued, but that is part of my previous chronic illnesses, so I couldn't really separate out if that was lingering COVID symptoms or if that was just part of my chronic condition, especially since I had the stress of driving 14 hours in a minivan with my cat and my dad. So that alone could have done it, but it also could have been COVID related. Sometime around the end of May, I was feeling good enough that I had a mini dance party in my room, and I had what I know now to be an asthma attack, where my chest was really tight. I found it hard to breathe. I was really short of breath. It was very scary as someone who had never had asthma before. I had had some lung issues after having pneumonia in high school. I had it twice in 1 year, and the first bout was really bad, but this wasn't like that. This was a lot more scary. In June, because my lungs were not getting any better, I reached out to my doctor and I did a video visit with my primary care physician since I was now back in Chicago, so I was in the same state as him, so I could do a video visit, which you can't do across state lines, which is logical but infuriating. Fortunately, while I was waiting to figure out what was going on with my lungs, I had a leftover albuterol inhaler from when I had a very bad chest cold that previous December, so December of 2019. Right before Christmas, I just got really unwell. It was just like a really bad chest cold, so that really sucked. But I had that albuterol inhaler that I had been taking back then that I could now take since my doctor had approved it. So I started using that, and then he sent me to go get another COVID test and to get an antibody test just to make sure that this wasn't COVID and to see and confirm that I did have it back when I was in Boston, because as you know, if you watched the first video, I never actually got a positive test when I was in Boston and first sick, so we were doing the antibody test to check. The first test I did of this little round was a drive-up test at a location in my medical system. They did the nose swab test for coronavirus, and apparently they also did like a nose antibody test, which isn't as accurate as a blood antibody test. So then I did have to go back to actually a different location to get the blood antibody test. This was still when they were doing the one where they shove it like all the way up to the back of your nose, and it bled. I cried. It was involuntary crying. It's like the trying to get things out crying, and I got blood on my face mask. So that was great. Really liked that. So both of my tests, my COVID COVID test and my blood antibody test and the swab test all came back negative. So I didn't have COVID and I didn't have COVID antibodies, which you already know if you watched the previous video. Based on my symptoms in March and how I was still feeling, my doctor decided that it was most likely that I either didn't have a strong enough reaction to COVID to still have antibodies. I took the test, my COVID test, too soon when I had COVID and now didn't have antibodies or didn't have enough of a reaction, or my COVID test was a false negative and I no longer had antibodies because it had been 3 months at that point. Basically, he said, even though there isn't clinical evidence, that anecdotal evidence points to COVID. After that point, I did go and get an MRI of my lungs because even though I got a chest x-ray back in Boston in the emergency room, there are things that can show up on an MRI that won't show up on an x-ray. So I did go get an x-ray and that came back clear. So when I was getting my chest x-ray, one of the doctors came in and said, like, we know that you had COVID or whatever, and we were wondering if you wanted to be a part of a testing study. And of course I said yes, because anything to help science. And so a nurse came in and she did the full-on swab, which she's like, oh, it's not gonna hurt too bad, it'll be uncomfortable. I'm like, oh, I've had it before. This was my 3rd time having it. It's like, oh, I've had it before. It really, really hurt. Like, just please be gentle. And she's like, you'll be fine. And then she did it and I bled and I cried. And I explained, like, I have fibromyalgia, it makes things more painful. And she was like, oh, you were not lying. I was like, no, I wasn't just kidding. And then she had to do it again because she didn't use the right swab because she didn't realize I was part of the trial. So then we did that one again and we did the regular nose swab and the throat swab. So if you're keeping track at home, I've now had those 4 tests. The one I did like a week prior and the one in Boston. So that's 6 total right there. 4 in one day. Aren't I a lucky girl? So since all of my COVID tests came back normal and my MRI came back normal, my doctor referred me to a pulmonologist. Before I went to see the pulmonologist, I had to go and do a lung function test where they have you blow into multiple tubes, kind of to see where you're at, what your lungs are doing, how they're functioning. I choked on most of them. It was terrible, but luckily my lungs were functioning all right. They were not great, but they were good enough. So I went to the pulmonologist, we reviewed the results, he did the normal exam stuff, listened to my lungs, and he diagnosed me with post-respiratory illness asthma. So basically the strength of the COVID infection did enough to my lungs that I now have asthma. He told me at the time that it would last a few months and then resolve. That was false, spoiler. But he prescribed me a daily inhaler, so something to manage my symptoms more on a daily basis than just my emergency inhaler. This was not my first time having post-respiratory illness asthma type thing. I did have an inhaler after the first time I had pneumonia, but it was definitely not anywhere near the same level. That was more if I was exercising because I was well enough to be active and I had to go to like marching band camp and bring my inhaler just in case, but it was pretty much fine back then. This was very much not fine. This may not seem relevant at the moment, but I promise it is. At the same time, I talked to my psychiatrist and we put me on a medicine for my energy. It is an antidepressant with a side effect of increased energy, and I did start that month as well. Some point in August, I did reach out to my doctor and end up getting the double dose of my inhaler, so it's just twice as strong. So instead of 100 milligrams, it's 200 because it wasn't fully managing my asthma, and I did notice a marked improvement in my condition when I switched. This was the month when we took an RV trip from Illinois to Utah. We have a condo out in Utah. My parents usually split the year between the 2 places, and we had our RV. We drove it to Utah, and I thought 14 hours in a minivan was bad, but 2 days, RV, 2 cats, 3 humans. It's the 2 cats that gets you so much stress. You can watch a video all about that in the cards above. So warning, I will put a little sign on screen that looks like this every time I'm about to talk about this. If you get grossed out by things easily, this is probably not something you want to watch, so skip to the timestamp. And sorry for those watching. It was on the way to Utah that I noticed that my nails were starting to peel away from my nail bed. It's very gross and uncomfortable, and it actually kind of hurts. So I look down and it basically just looks like the white part of my nail is growing and I can see more under my nail. I wondered if this could be COVID related because I was very ill, but at the same time, I had just doubled my inhaler, and I'd started my inhaler the month before, and I'd also just started that new energy antidepressant thing. So I thought it might be a side effect of one of those medications. I am someone who is very susceptible to side effects. I have bad drug reactions frequently. So I reached out to both my doctors to be like, hey, is it possible that this is this thing? Could it possibly cause this? And both of them were like, nah, not really. I did stop taking the energy antidepressant just in an abundance of caution. I also hadn't noticed that big of an improvement, so I wasn't that sad about it. But we decided my inhaler was safe, which I think is the case. So that's good. Swivel back. Utah was fun, but it was really hard because of the increased altitude. That was really hard on my lungs, as well as this was around the time of the California wildfires, and the smoke had made it all the way to Utah, and that also decreased the air quality and made it really hard for me to breathe. So I was really relieved when we came home. So when we got back to Chicago in September, I went and saw a dermatologist about my nails, and she didn't really know what was going on. So she did take a nail clipping to see if it was fungus. It was not, thankfully, but then basically said that it was either idiopathic or the first symptom of something like psoriasis, and we'd have to wait and see. Idiopathic means they don't know why it's happening. So basically I got a shrug. She did have me go and get a thyroid test because this can be a symptom of a thyroid condition. Luckily, my dad is very smart and had me reach out to my primary care physician to ask if there were any other blood work kind of things that they wanted me to get done, because I do not do well with blood draws. I am a small human with already low blood pressure and fibromyalgia, so it's just like a mess of a time. Luckily, I've stopped crying when they do them though, so that's impressive. I did reach out to him, and luckily he said that he needed me to get a blood sugar test as well as a cholesterol test, which are apparently blood tests that you're supposed to do in your early 20s. So if you're in your early 20s and don't regularly see a doctor, maybe look into seeing one to get those done. So my blood sugar test came back really low, so they had me go back and do the 3-hour fasting one, which is where they do this when you're pregnant too. So if you've heard of the gestational diabetes test, it's pretty much the same thing, but I think this one's shorter, where you fast, you go in, they take your blood to test your blood sugar, they make you down a sugary drink, and then they take your blood again, and then they take your blood again an hour later, and then another hour after that to see how your body's processing sugar. And it sucks. The drink is gross. I got it down. I like really sugary things, but even this was a lot for me. It's like 4 blood draws, and I'm not good with those. But then I came back fine. I don't have any blood sugar issues, so that's good. Still glad we did it, because now I have peace of mind. My cholesterol, however, is high, which is weird because I don't eat a lot of red meat. I don't eat a lot of things that are high in cholesterol. I do live a pretty sedentary lifestyle because of my chronic illness and chronic fatigue and chronic pain. But even then, I really just shouldn't be that high risk. I mean, hereditary, yes, but like other than that. So I don't have any proof of this, but anecdotally, in a lot of the Facebook groups I'm in for other survivors of COVID and long haulers, a lot of people have post-COVID gotten high cholesterol results that they previously hadn't gotten. So we'll see if anything comes out about that. I am now working on that, but yeah. These months, COVID-wise, were pretty uneventful. My lungs were okay. They were pretty well managed by my daily inhaler. I'm sure I took my rescue inhaler more frequently than I do now, probably, but it was not memorable. What is memorable is that in November, I got my TMJ splint, which I don't wear while filming because it gives me a lisp and it looks really stupid, but it's just like a clear retainer that is working to help fix my TMJ, because my TMJ is much worse than I thought. This is where we get to the bad part. A little bit into December, my lungs decided to really crap out on me. I was using my rescue inhaler every 4 hours in addition to my morning management inhaler, and I was still doing very poorly. I was really looking forward to the times when I could take my inhaler again. So I called my pulmonologist and made a same-day appointment with one of his nurse practitioners because he was all booked up, obviously, and she prescribed me a steroid. I'm not gonna get too much into this now, but I took the steroid that day and promptly had an allergic reaction, which was pretty terrible. So that day I had symptoms, and then the next day I called my doctor and was like, hey, these are the things that happened. And they were like, that's an allergic reaction, stop taking it. I was like, Good, because I wasn't gonna. And they told me to go to urgent care. So I called urgent care because we live in COVID time and you need to have an appointment even for urgent care. And they basically said normally they could treat me, but because of COVID, the thing that they would want to do most likely, they can't do in office anymore. They don't do nebulizer treatments, which is what they thought I needed in office because it spews a lot of vapor. Like it's basically like aerosolizing your COVID, which meant I had to go to the ER. It was a lot better going to the ER here than in Boston because I had my family, so my mom drove me. I didn't have to take the T. My mom stayed in the waiting room just so that I would know that she was there, which was just a huge relief. Yeah, it didn't suck as much, still wasn't fun. They took me and gave me a chest x-ray, which came back fine, and then they took me back, put me in a private room, and gave me a nebulizing treatment. Obviously, private room because it's aerosolizing everything. They did that, and immediately I was just like, oh my god, this is what breathing feels like? I forgot. So they sent me home with a nebulizer. The whole process took like 6 hours. I'm making it sound fast. It was not, but it was much less dramatic than the time before. For the rest of December, I used that nebulizer every 4 hours on the hour as soon as I could because my lungs were just struggling so much. I also was downing tea at all times. But the nebulizer eventually did work, so we'll get to that in a second. First, back to my nails. So I went to another dermatologist recommended by my rheumatologist who I messaged in kind of like a last-ditch effort to find out what was going on, and she recommended me to this dermatologist who immediately looked at my nails and was like, oh, I've had that. I know what that is. It's this thing I can't pronounce, and gave me a treatment plan, which is basically that I wear nail hardeners on my nails because they make them less likely to bend, which hurts so much. And then I do a steroid drop thing every night, and that's been working pretty well, I think. It'll take a long time for them to recover though, so who knows? I am also now taking a supplement for your hair, skin, nails, which will hopefully also help. This is me while editing to come back to add that after the emergency room, I did go and get a drive-through COVID test about a week later after exposure, like risk of exposure, and it was negative. But they actually let you do them yourself when you do drive-through, and it's like the regular swab that you stick up your nose and twist around, so I've now had 7 COVID tests. Just thought I'd add that. That brings us to last month, January. Pretty quickly into the month, I was off the nebulizer and either doing it once at night when my asthma is really bad or doing my rescue inhaler instead. I basically phased out the nebulizer, switched to my rescue inhaler, and then now I'm on just my daily inhaler. I did have to switch inhalers because of insurance, but I think I actually like this one better, so that's good. Nails are fine, my fatigue is fine. I am currently in a fibromyalgia flare-up, however, which isn't fun, but is not exactly COVID related. I am still, however, generally fatigued, even before my fibro flare-up, and I do experience some asthma symptoms most days. Today you can hear it in my voice. I'm already starting to get hoarse. I'm pretty much out of breath. After this, I will need to lie down for an hour or so there's that. So basically, in summary, I had COVID 10 months ago, and I now have debilitating asthma that is luckily currently under control, but could re-flare up at any time. And I'm on 4 new medications since I had it. I just want to get across that this is not a illness where you either recover or pass away. It's not a binary like that. There are people in the middle like me who are long haulers and are still sick 10 months later who now have a chronic condition. It's not necessarily full recovery, no recovery. There's a middle ground. If you have any questions about my experience or anything else, please feel free to leave them in the comments and I'll hopefully address them. And I hope that you are staying safe, wearing a mask, socially distancing, staying home. I know I sound like a broken record, but it's really important. If you want to see more of me, you can subscribe down below. Check me out on Instagram. That's where I am the most active. And let me know what you think. If there's anything specific you want to see from me, I'm always open to suggestions. I make these videos primarily for me, but it's always fun when I find out someone actually watches them. Please be safe, take care of yourself. I hope that you have a wonderful February and a wonderful day, and hopefully you'll come back and see me soon. Bye.